All right. So, everyone always wants to know what foods you should eat to, burn fat
Right.
and lose weight.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to dive deep into a source that covers that exact topic. And it is a pretty interesting read.
Okay. Sounds good.
It's called Foods That Burn Fat, Foods That Turn to Fat. And it's by Tom Venuto.
Oh.
Now, if that name sounds familiar, it might be because he also wrote the very popular Burn the Fat, Feed the Muscle.
Right. BFFM.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of like a spin-off of that, or, comes from that world.
Sure.
So he's a natural bodybuilder, very knowledgeable in this area. And this particular piece of writing was targeted towards people following the BFFM program.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
coming from experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now we're going to focus on a specific part of it called the Terrific 12, which is his list of the 12 best foods for losing fat.
Okay.
So if you want to cut through the noise and get straight to some actionable information about what to eat,
I like it.
this is the deep dive for you. So without further ado, let's jump right in. And starting with the first food on the list, it is oatmeal.
Okay.
Now this is, he says if he had to pick just one source of those complex starchy carbohydrates.
Yeah.
For fat loss programs, this would be it. And this is a favorite of so many, bodybuilders, fitness models. Everyone swears by their oatmeal.
Right. It's a staple.
So what makes it so good?
Well, I think first, just thinking about the nutritional makeup, a half-cup serving has got a good mix of carbohydrates, about 27 grams. You've got a decent amount of protein, around 5 grams, and then even some healthy fats, about 3 grams.
Oh, wow. So it's kind of got everything you need.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
does. And I think even more important than that when you're thinking about, managing your weight and your body fat is how your body actually processes it.
Okay.
So, the carbohydrates in oatmeal are released relatively slowly thanks to its lower glycemic index. And then because it has that protein and fat, the glycemic index is kind of how quickly that sugar enters your bloodstream. Oatmeal is going to give you that nice, steady, gentler release of energy as opposed to something that's going to spike it up really quick.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
no sugar crashes.
Right, exactly.
And he's very specific about what type of oatmeal you should be eating.
Yeah.
What are we looking for?
So he emphasizes getting all natural oats. So your old-fashioned rolled oats, quicker cooking, and those are fine.
Okay.
But stay away from the pre-sweetened and flavored packet.
Oh, yeah.
Because those are full of added sugar and processed ingredients.
It makes sense.
Instead, boost the flavor yourself.
Yeah.
Add some things like natural applesauce,
Oh, that's good.
a little cinnamon, some crushed walnuts for, healthy fats and some good texture,
Oh, yeah.
some flax seeds. He even mentions adding like a vanilla praline protein powder if you want to make it like a complete meal.
Oh, wow. So you can really make a meal out of oatmeal.
You really can.
Wow, that's great.
And if you're looking for some variety within that, same family, he calls it the oatmeal family.
Oh.
You've got things like barley wheat, triticale, rye oat, bran flax cereals, even those multi-grain combinations you see.
Oh, so there's a lot of options there.
There are a lot of options.
Great. Okay. So moving on to number 2 on this list, we have yams and sweet potatoes.
Okay.
Another favorite in the fitness world, it seems.
It is.
What's so good about these?
Well, I think they're so popular because it's kind of a blend of things. Venuto mentions the great taste. They're whole unprocessed foods. They're relatively low calorie.
Right.
They're packed with nutrients. They have lots of antioxidants, specifically like beta carotene that you get from that really vibrant color.
Right.
He even quotes somebody named Brian Rowley from FLEX magazine,
Right.
who points out that bodybuilders often turn to yams when they're really trying to get lean
Interesting.
because they have a lower glycemic index than something like a waxy white potato.
Okay, so glycemic index is a little more important with this one.
It is. Although Venuto says that in the context of his BFFM program in general, glycemic index is more of a secondary consideration.
Oh, yeah.
But if you are somebody who knows that they're really sensitive to carbohydrates, or you're on a very strict diet, then being a little more mindful of the glycemic index of your carb choices, like opting for a yam over a white potato, might be helpful.
Okay, that makes sense.
He also clears up a common confusion about yams and sweet potatoes.
Okay.
They're not botanically identical.
Oh, really?
Sweet potatoes actually tend to have a slightly higher glycemic index.
Oh, okay.
But nutritionally, they're very similar and both good choices when you're, focused on losing fat.
Gotcha. So it's not really a huge difference.
No, not huge visually. Yams tend to be a little darker orange, more pointed on the ends and come in more varied shapes.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of nutrition, very similar.
So should we just look for whichever one is available or whatever looks good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. And he gives a really good meal idea. He says, pair yam with some green vegetables and then a lean protein source like a chicken breast or lean red meat or fish.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So there's your well-balanced meal. All right. So next up is one that might surprise some people because it gets kind of a bad rap, especially when people are trying to lose weight.
Oh, okay.
And that is the regular potato, the white or red kind.
Interesting.
So, people are always afraid of potatoes, but what does he say?
Well, he argues that this kind of negative perception of the potato is undeserved, especially in the context of, losing fat.
Okay.
He points out that they are a complex carb. It's a whole unprocessed food.
Mm-hmm.
They have fiber, they've got vitamins and minerals they're filling, and relatively low in calories on their own.
Okay, but I feel like people think they're high calorie.
Right. Well, I think that comes down to what people are adding to the potato.
Oh, yeah.
Things like butter, sour cream, and bacon bits.
Of course.
A plain baked or boiled potato is a very different thing than a loaded potato.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the extra stuff that gets us in trouble.
Exactly. And he even has some healthier topping suggestions if you're looking to, spruce it up a bit.
Like what?
Like butter sprinkle salsa.
Okay.
Or just keeping it simple. And he also talks about that glycemic index concern again.
Right.
Potatoes do have a higher glycemic index than some other carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
But when you eat them as part of a complete meal with your protein and maybe some fat,
Yeah.
it's a much more moderate effect on your blood sugar.
Oh, okay.
He also points out that even within the category of white potatoes, there's variation. So like a bacon potato actually has a lower glycemic index than like a waxy potato or boiler potato.
Huh, okay, interesting.
So while he does say if you are very carb sensitive, you might still prefer those yams over the white potatoes. But he really emphasizes that white potatoes can definitely be part of a fat-burning diet.
So there you go. Don't be afraid of the potato.
Right.
And to prove his point, he actually says he was eating them right up until bodybuilding competitions.
Wow. Okay, so he really believes in them.
He does all right. Moving on to another classic in the bodybuilding world, and that is brown rice.
Okay.
So I feel like everyone kind of, knows brown rice is good for you, but why is it good for you?
Well, it's certainly considered like a staple.
Yeah.
Whether bodybuilders are trying to, lean down or not.
Yeah.
They might adjust their portions. Somebody's really cutting. They might increase their green veggies and then reduce the amount of rice they're eating.
Okay, so smaller portions when you're really trying to lean down.
Exactly. But the really crucial thing here is calorie control and avoiding adding fats.
Okay, so we're talking about steamed or boiled rice, not, fried rice with a bunch of oil.
Right, exactly. And he specifically recommends slow-cooked brown rice or basmati rice.
Okay.
That's kind of the preferred options. He says instant rice and white rice are less ideal for a strict fat loss plan because they're digested more quickly, so they act more like simple carbohydrates.
Oh, okay.
And white rice, loses some of its nutritional value during that milling process.
So brown rice it is.
Yeah, the best results.
Okay, great. Next on the list is 100% whole wheat and whole grain products.
Okay.
And I feel like a lot of people get confused here about what to choose.
Yeah, there's a lot of options out there.
So what's the rule?
So Venuto says that a baseline diet can include a variety of red products, but they must be 100% whole grain.
Okay.
So you really have to look at that ingredient list on the package.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that's the very first thing you see, 100% whole wheat, 100% whole grain.
So if it doesn't say that it's a no-go?
Yeah, white bread and products made with white flour, generally off the table, except maybe as a very occasional treat.
So, every once in a while you can have some white bread, but most of the time it should be that 100% whole grain.
Exactly. And he also talks about carbohydrate sensitivity again.
Okay.
So he says even whole wheat bread might be one of the first things somebody who's very carb sensitive might reduce or eliminate.
Interesting.
He also talks about gluten sensitivity, which affects a smaller percentage of people.
Right.
But that can cause digestive issues.
Yeah.
And he mentions, it's interesting, a lot of bodybuilders will actually cut out things like pasta and bread in those final weeks leading up to a competition to get really lean.
Wow. So they really are avoiding carbs?
Yeah, for that short period of time.
But in general, he says that 100% whole wheat and other whole grains can be part of a long-term plan for managing your body composition, depending on how strict you need to be.
Right.
Okay, great. The next one on the list is something that I think we all know is good for us, and that is green fibrous vegetables.
Yeah, those are the real superstars.
Why are they so good for us?
They are your top tier choice for those fat-burning carbs.
Really?
They have a really incredibly low calorie density,
Yeah, that's mean.
which means you can eat a lot of them and not really take in that many calories.
Right.
You can really fill up on them without filling up on those calories. And
They're full of nutrients.
exactly full of nutrients. Very hard to overeat green vegetables.
Right.
He really encourages eating them liberally, especially later in the day, and points out that a diet combining lots of green veggies with those lean protein sources is a very effective strategy for fat loss.
So load up on the broccoli and the spinach.
Absolutely.
All right. And next on the list, we have fresh fruit. And this is where I think some people might get a little confused or worried because there's always a debate about fruit and, people think the sugar content is too high.
Yeah, there is a lot of debate about that.
So what's the real story?
So he tackles that belief that, fruit is fattening.
Mm-hmm.
He clarifies that while a diet primarily based on complex carbs
Right.
is going to be more supportive of fat loss than one that's mostly simple carbs.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean fruit is a bad choice.
Okay.
Fruits are natural sources of simple carbs.
Okay.
But most of them are relatively low in calories and carb grams compared to starchy foods.
Mm-hmm.
And they're full of fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants.
So they do have a lot of benefits.
They do.
And what about those, dried fruits like raisins, dates, all those, are those?
Okay. He advises being a little cautious with those, especially if you're on a very strict low-calorie diet, because they are a lot more calorie-dense.
Right.
He recommends sticking with things like apples, peaches, grapefruits, oranges, which are, 60, 80 calories or less per serving.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Not bad at all.
Right.
Great additions to most nutritional plans.
But I guess the takeaway is that, most of your carbohydrates should still come from those complex sources.
Exactly. And, an all-fruit diet is not going to be as effective for fat loss as one that focuses on those fibrous vegetables and lean protein.
Okay, so fruit's good, but don't overdo it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Next category is skim milk and non-fat dairy products.
Okay.
So what's the reasoning behind these?
So Venuto defines this category pretty broadly.
Yeah.
Milk, cheese, yogurt, sugar-free frozen yogurt, cottage cheese.
Okay, so pretty much any dairy product.
Yeah, but here's the catch. They have to be fat-free, skim, or at most 1% low fat.
Oh, really?
So he specifically advises against whole milk.
Wow, even 2%.
Even 2%.
Interesting.
Because of that fat content. And he points out that dairy products are what we call combination foods.
Which means?
Which means they give you both carbohydrates and protein.
Okay.
And the protein in dairy is actually a huge benefit. He highlights that dairy contains high-quality, complete protein, which is really crucial for preserving your muscle mass when you're losing fat, and it also makes you feel fuller.
Oh, okay.
So he says things like non-fat cottage cheese can actually be counted as a protein serving in your meal plan.
So instead of like meat or something.
Exactly. Or, non-fat cheese can be a good way to add some extra protein to your meals.
That makes sense.
He does note that yogurt generally has a little less protein than cottage cheese.
Okay.
So it tends to be more of a simple carb serving, although you can always add protein powder if you want.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the protein sources now.
Okay.
We have chicken breast first, and he kind of lumps turkey breast in there as well.
Right, very similar.
And this seems to be like the quintessential, fitness food if you're trying to lose weight or just, be healthy.
Yeah, that's
Always chicken breast.
He actually identifies it as the most popular protein choice for bodybuilders and people trying to lose fat. The key is to make sure you're removing the skin.
Okay.
And you're choosing the light meat from the breasts.
Right, because the thighs have a lot more fat on them.
Exactly. And focus on those healthy cooking methods. So broiling, grilling, roasting, and not frying.
And what about those, packaged lunch meats, like the turkey slices and things like that? Are those?
Okay. So he advises against relying on those as your daily protein staple.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he refers to them as fabricated foods.
Oh, yeah.
Because they contain a lot of sodium preservatives, binders, fillers.
Right.
So while they can be convenient every once in a while, they shouldn't be your main protein source.
Okay, so stick to the real stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, and next we have egg whites.
Okay, another great option.
Super lean.
Super lean. He stresses the importance of including lean protein with every meal.
Right.
And egg whites are about as lean as it gets.
So 0 fat?
Virtually 0 fat, ranks them right up there with chicken breast.
Wow.
And he says while whole eggs are a fantastic source of protein, all that fat and calories is in the yolk.
Right, so what are we doing with the yolks? Are we just getting rid of them?
He recommends limiting them.
Okay.
So maybe 1 yolk for every 6 egg whites.
Okay, that's not too bad.
No, not too bad.
You can still get a little bit of that yolk in there.
Exactly. And he gives some tips on how to separate them yourself, or you can just buy the egg whites
Right.
already separated. And he encourages using them liberally. You know, omelets, frittatas, scrambled eggs, even fried eggs.
So lots of different ways to use those egg whites.
Yeah.
Great. Moving on to number 11 on the terrific 12 list, we have fish and shellfish.
Okay.
And I feel like this is a good one because it adds some variety to what can be a kind of boring diet sometimes.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He points out that, people find the typical bodybuilding diet, egg whites, tuna chicken,
Right.
to be very monotonous.
Sure.
So incorporating a variety of fish and shellfish not only makes it more interesting, but it also provides those good fats
Oh, yeah.
and a lot of different nutrients.
So what kind of fish are we talking about here?
Like, he gives a big long list, but, things like salmon, tuna, haddock, flounder, mackerel, trouts.
Okay, so lots of good options.
Lots of options.
And how should we prepare them?
He recommends the same as the chicken and the turkey, baking, grilling, broiling.
Okay, so avoid the fried fish.
Exactly. And avoid those fatty sauces and adding butter.
Right.
Most fish are naturally low in fat and high in protein.
Yeah.
But he specifically mentions that the fatty fish, like salmon and mackerel,
Mm-hmm.
are very high in those beneficial omega-3 fatty acids. So make sure to include those regularly.
So those are extra good.
They are, and then shellfish as well. Shrimp, crab, lobster, mussels,
Oh, yeah.
all great options.
So really good variety there.
Yeah, tons of variety.
And what about when we eat at restaurants? Can we order fish?
He says it's a good choice, but just be aware of potential hidden fats and extra calories in the preparation.
So maybe ask how it's cooked.
Yeah, exactly.
And finally, we've come to the last one on the list, lean red meat. Now, I know a lot of people are a little afraid of red meat or, they have questions about it.
Yeah, it can be a controversial one.
It can be. So what does he say about it?
Well, he actually acknowledges, the fondness that bodybuilders have for red meat.
Oh, yeah.
He even suggests it might play a role in muscle growth because of its high protein content, and it's also a good source of, B12 iron creatine.
Okay. So it does have some benefits.
It does. The concern usually comes down to the fat content,
Right.
but he points out that you can't just lump all red meat together.
Oh, okay.
There are leaner options out there.
So it's about choosing wisely.
Exactly. You need to select the leanest cuts
Ah.
and be mindful of your portion sizes.
Yeah.
He gives a good comparison. A 6-ounce serving of lean top round steak has significantly less fat than a 6-ounce serving of untrimmed porterhouse.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine.
And, a restaurant portion of porterhouse can easily have over 100 grams of fat.
Oh, my gosh.
So, opt for those leanest cuts, control your portions.
Okay, so red meat can be part of a healthy diet if you do it right.
Exactly.
All right, well, there you have it. Those are Tom Venuto's terrific 12 foods for fat loss. And clearly, it's not about, magic foods that just melt fat away.
Right. Yeah.
It's about establishing a good foundation for your diet.
Yeah.
Built on those nutrient-dense whole foods that support your health and help you create that calorie balance that's needed to reach your goals.
And what I think is important for people to consider now is, how do these different food categories fit into their own current eating habit?
That's a great point.
Take a look at what you're already eating.
Mm-hmm.
Think about where you might see opportunities to incorporate more of these terrific 12 foods to, help move you towards your goal.
Right, and make it something that you can actually stick with.
Absolutely.
So on that note, here's a final thought for everyone listening.
Okay.
Now that we've talked about these different foundational food groups, what's one small but significant adjustment that you could make in your next meal
I like that.
that could really steer you in a more positive direction?
Yeah.
We encourage everyone to really explore these different food groups further and think about how they can work best for you and your individual needs.
That's a great takeaway.
All right, and that's it for today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, we'll see you next time.
See you later.